Good morning. Welcome to Trainwreck Marriage. I'm Dave Touchton.
And I'm Susan Touchton.
Hey, we're going to hit, as you know, as we kind of live through life, a lot of our podcast has to do with what's currently going on in our life. And that's, we think God uses what's going on in our lives as a way to speak to somebody. This week has been an extremely tough week for us. My dad is, after 50 years, is no longer at the church he's at due to some situations. And at the end of the day, the details we're not getting into, and they really don't matter. My real question is, what do you do with church hurt? And I think today's a good subject title because church hurt is one of those things that happens to everybody, and it's just a matter of time. There may be some that never get it, but I think back to the first time that I had church hurt was when I was a sophomore in high school. We were three boys of us always rode together, and we were late to the youth Bible study, and we got there late. I mean, really late, like 20 minutes late. And so we get up to the door. It's at the pastor's house. We start to grab the knob. Everybody starts walking out. It's like, is it already over? It normally goes an hour and a half. Yeah, it's already over. You missed the whole thing. And so people were getting in their cars and leaving. So we said our goodbyes and we left. And so then on Sunday, we found out that they made a plan when we pulled up to leave and go get ice cream and then finish without us. Honestly, that was the place in my life where I said I can trust the world more than I can Christians, because I know the world's going to screw me and Christians shouldn't. So I do have a history with church hurt. And, it's one of those things that, what do you do with it?
Yeah, and fortunately, I can't say that I've directly had the church hurt me. So often when people think of church, they think that it's a place to, there's many different things I guess people think of. It's a place to go get fed. It's a place to serve. It's a place to worship with other believers. And it is all those things. But we all have this expectation of it's a safe place, and it's a place that we can go and not be judged and not get hurt. But in reality, the church is made up of people, and we are all sinners, and we all hurt in some form or another. And things that are said and things that are done sometimes hurt worse than others. But we have this expectation that because it's a church, you shouldn't get hurt by the people. And in reality, that would be great, but it's not always true. And so, like David said, what do we do with that church that hurts us? It's kind of like when you get hurt by somebody that you really love. You could even do the same thing. What do you do with it when you get hurt by your spouse? What do you do when you get hurt by your children? What do you do when you get hurt by your best friend? Because hurt is going to happen, and things are going to happen that we wish wouldn't. But again, we're all human, and we're all sinners. The Bible is clear on telling us that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And so what do we do with that?
Well, and that's what I think, first of all, ground rules is number one, people hurt you, not the church and not God. It is people, and everyone is flawed and everyone sins, and there's a whole lot of things that go in there. So just as ground rules, it's not the church, it's people. It's people are sinners and they're flawed. So, and it wasn't God in this situation. And I think that's sometimes where we kind of lump everyone together as, is it God? Is it the church? Is it people? Well, it doesn't really matter. They all suck. And I think that's number one, not right, but number two, unfair. Because when specific people hurt you, even if they're in leadership in the church and speak for the church and there's agreement in the church, it's still people doing it. And I think that's a definition that we've got to define here, because it's very easy, and I've said it 1,000 times, that church hurt me, which is not a true statement. People in the church hurt me. That does not mean the church hurt me. The people are the church. So, I mean, you can kind of wrap that around. My focus is not to blame God and not to blame the actual church, because every church is different. Now, do I agree with decisions the churches have made? Absolutely not. Do I kind of lump that? So when you hear me say the church, it's really individuals. It's hard even in my head to separate them. But how do you forgive through it?
I think a clear point that needs to be made, and hopefully that is coming across, is it's not God that hurt you. Yes, it's his people and it's his flock, but it's not him personally. And so when we get hurt by, again, whether it be the church, whether it be your spouse, kids, family, friends, whatever the case may be, is we've got to remember that we have to trust God, and that it's not him that is hurting us, it's people. And people are flawed and people are broken, and we don't always know what somebody's going through. Not that that justifies anything, because the hurt is real and we don't want to have to justify it. But they are people, and they're broken and flawed and sinful people. And so I think just being sure to know that, when you are hurt by the people of the church, it's not God. We would encourage you not to turn away from God, but to draw close to him and see what he's trying to teach you through whatever hurt you might be going through.
Yeah, no. Anyway, I'm struggling this morning for a whole lot of reasons, and I'm trying not to focus, and there's reason for that. And but anyway, when the hurt is deep, how do you get past it? What does that look like? And for me, what I've learned, what works for me, and this is what I do, is I start surrendering the situation to God. That does not automatically remove the hurt, but I want God in control of the situation in my head. Because again, unforgiveness is me drinking poison expecting you to die. And so now as you go through that, the only one that can resolve this, not only in my head, in the church, and do different things, is God. That's the only one that we've got to rely on to handle things. And what does forgiveness look like? It's just one of those things to where you just I try just to give it to God. Now, do I take it back? Absolutely. Is it in my mind? Absolutely. I woke up this morning thinking about it, and it's like, God, I surrender this to you. I don't know what to do with this. And am I hurt? Yes. Am I upset? There's times of flashes of being mad. But I also know at the end of the day that me retaliating on those people, number one, is it only hurts me. I'm not even going to go down the biblical road, because the problem is a lot of times you'll get justification, which does you no good, only makes you madder. And so going down the biblical road, you go to the thought process of you were forgiven when you didn't deserve it. So it's a slippery slope, and it's one of those things that honestly is tough to navigate some days. And some days I do great, and other days I do horribly. Um, in this, there was a mourning period for me. Over the weekend, I really mourned till Monday, and then I was pissed Monday. Now, for me to deal with that, what I've found is I have trusted people. I have one trusted person that I called to vent. And it's not about them agreeing with me, disagreeing with me. It's letting me just throw up all over them that I'm pissed. They're all assholes. I don't care. I hate them. You name it. Because for me, a lot of times it's about me getting it out. That's my first step, is to release it to someone. Because if I keep it inside of me, it eats me alive.
Well, and I think that's with really anything that is a heavy burden, or a heavy circumstance that you have to deal with. Something that we don't want to forget also is that time, the old saying, time heals all wounds. And that's true. A lot of times when we get hurt by someone, we just want it to be fixed right now, but that's not part of God's plan. I think part of God's plan is to grow you through this hurt, to make you be more like He wants you to be, which takes time. And like David said, I think, when we were going through all our marriage stuff, we've told you before that we went to a counselor, and a lot of that reasoning was just to get it out, because anything that you hold on to festers and becomes consuming. So talking about it, whether it be, hurt, the death of a loved one, whatever, talking about that and getting it out to a trusted recipient is a huge healing process. And again, it takes time, but I think that I think that's key, is finding that person that you can trust and just let them basically throw up all over you, or you throw up all over them, what you're feeling and how it's hurt you. And even if they don't give you any kind of counsel, that you're just able to get it out, because that is part of the healing process.
For me, it's not about counsel. It's about me throwing up. And the thing I would add to time is I'd also add forgiveness. Because without forgiveness, time does no good. It just hangs on. If you're not giving it to God to try to figure out what does forgiveness look like in this situation. And a lot of my prayers is, God, I got no idea what to do with this. I don't know how to forgive them. You're going to have to show me. I mean, I am not saying that it's a great and magical prayer. It's really, God, I got no idea. And then with time, God's got time to work through the situation. It's one of those things where vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I mean, and that brings me to my next thing is gossip. In this situation with my type of personality, I've been in the church for 50 years. I know a lot of people, and I could go spread a story that could be really the problem with stories that I run into is everyone doesn't tell always exactly the way it is. They slant it so it looks good for them. And so I've learned not to start, whether it be Facebook, whether it be individuals, whether it be trying to find somebody that knows who they are so you can hear, oh, I can't believe they did that. It's really one of those things that gossip is a broad brush, but it's really retaliation. You're trying to set them up to fail, make sure everybody knows who they are and why they're evil. So that's been the one thing that I've had to, thoughts have went through my head, I've chose not to do any of them. And so it's kind of one of those things that, really the one of the worst things you can do is start gossiping, trying to retaliate against them, because then you're hurting people. Hurt's one of those things that when you get hurt, you tend to hurt. And this is completely unnatural for me. I do not like not hurting back because I've done it so many years, and I want to see the results in my time. And I'm really trying to figure out how to give this to God and let it be in His time, not mine. So, as you start working through something like that, just telling random people what evil they are and what they did. Now, I will say, God's going to put people in my world that I'm going to tell, but it'll be truth.
Well, and I think that's the thing is, I think that there's a fine line between talking to somebody and getting it out versus gossiping, telling everybody and molding it to your benefit, to
Right.
where it looks like they were all wrong and you were all right. That could be a slippery slope. But again, finding that person that you can share everything with, but then people are going to ask you about the situation, or why you're not at church, or why you're not this, or why you're not that. And just, I think that's a key thing, is being sure that the people that you tell, you're telling them the truth. And your version of the truth and the person that hurt you's version of the truth are probably a little bit different. But you can only tell your version of the truth, and not trying to intentionally put that other person down or make them look, favorably in your eyes, if that kind of makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense, because you're exactly right. There's your version, their version, and the truth is in the middle, because the problem is you're looking through the lens of the past when you look into a situation. And so and I got into this a lot when we were first struggling. What I thought was coming out of my mouth that I had in my head was not what they heard. And I think that's a real key point, because, I still do it. What the thought that was in my head, and I say it, I seen it as all positive. They seen it as all negative. So I think that, owning who you are is really the first step. Trying to realize that you're not perfect. You do say things that are not correct. And your intent in your head may have made sense to you, but due to whether it be fear or situation or whatever, it did not come out that way at all. I think it's one of those things that we justify what we do to make ourselves feel better. And what, it doesn't matter what side of the stick you're on this conversation, justification and blame is very easily done. Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of those things that I never understood, because honestly, that's just who I was. I justified everything and I blamed everybody but me. I'd say, yeah, it's my fault, but that was usually how the conversation went. So I think, if you're having to justify the situation, I think you're in trouble. And I think that should be a warning sign to where you step back and say, okay, hold on here. Why am I having to justify this? You know what? Because the thing is, when it's truth, it's not good or bad. It's just true. And here's what happened. The truth. And so I think trying to, and that's what actually probably, in most situations in the church make it worse, is its justification of why I did it. Mm-hmm. Not a true heartfelt, I am sorry. It gets to be, well, I was right because.
Well, and that's the thing is, everybody wants to be right. everybody wants to be looked on favorably. Nobody wants to admit a wrong. Nobody wants to admit that they made a mistake or that they did anything wrong. And so even subconsciously, we, come up with all these justifications and don't even know that we're doing it. So I think just being mindful of it is key, because every situation where there's a hurt or something, it takes two people, and I'm sure the person that hurt us,
as a family,
hurt us as a family, can justify, even somewhat scripturally, which I've yet to find those scriptures yet, but I'm working on it, but can justify why he did what he did. And on our side of the story is there is no justification. It was just wrong. He should be ashamed of himself. All these things go through our head. But the one thing that keeps coming through my head is, God asking, okay, what are you going to do with this situation? Like, this is a big situation. And to the point that even though it wasn't directly at David and I, it was to David's dad, which is like to one of our kids. You hurt one of our kids or our parents or any family member, and we're going to make sure you pay for it. And so they might as well have hurt us. And in a sense they did, because that was our home church, and now they're not allowed to come back. So therefore we're not allowed to come. It's a hot mess, but I think he's got his version. We've got our version. And again, there's some truth in the middle on both sides. Ironically enough, this morning, which I say that because I don't believe in irony, it's just God's blessing. I was scrolling through Facebook this morning because I had some extra time, and I came across this saying: always pray to have eyes that see the best in people, a heart that forgives the worst, a mind that forgets the bad, and a soul that never loses faith in God. So I'm going to read that again, and I want you to think about all those points. Always pray to have eyes that see the best in people, a heart that forgives the worst, a mind that forgets the bad, and a soul that never loses faith in God. And the thing is, the mind part that forgets the bad is kind of the hard part for me, because my mind is, if I have too much quiet time, my mind usually has a tendency to go to places that it probably shouldn't. But a mind that, forgets the hurt. And I think that comes with forgiveness and in time, because right now, I'm not saying that we want anything bad to happen to him, but forgiving it's still really new, and it's still, the hurt is really fresh. And so, I can say that I forgive him, but those are just words, because the hurt is deep, and it really hurts me even for the offender, because I wouldn't have expected what they did, and so it's just the mind. My heart breaks for him, in the sense of there will be judgment at some point. And thankfully, it's not ours to judge. But it's just a heart-heavy situation. But the mind wants revenge. The mind wants evil. The mind wants junk. And so just remembering that, having that mind that forgets.
Well, and the thought that, honestly, I kept thinking I'd forget, and I haven't forgot it all. So God's wanting me to relay this. How you can tell, I don't know how to word this, but anyway, let me just jump off into it. Jesus was not in this situation because Christians weren't hurt by Jesus. They only received good things from Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so this isn't a God situation of why is God doing this to me? This is a people situation, because if you really look at all of Jesus's stories, it wasn't something that people come away with hurt and were mad. That's a people thing. And that's, now you get into the Pharisees, everybody walked away mad at some point in time because they were above everyone else. That's not what I'm not going down that road. I'm going down the road of, what did Christ do for people? He only died on the cross so that you have a chance of freedom. And it's one of those things that you've got to stay focused in, and you got to know who God is, because that's not his heart to hurt people. And so that kind of, when you get that, and I believe that our mess is our message. So everything that happens to us, there's a reason, and I'm all right with it. God's going to show me sometime down the way of where he's going to reuse this. But I really, that's kind of the point that keeps resonating in me, is if Jesus was in the conversation, there's only love and forgiveness. There's not a, I'm right, you're wrong, let me justify why, let me prove to you. That's the human side coming out in us. And so it's kind of one of those things that, as I work through this, and with it being my dad, it is very personal to me. But it's one of those things of, okay, now let's eliminate the players. Was there love, grace, and mercy? No. Okay, so that means that this wasn't a God thing. Then you get into justification and blame and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's a human trait. So, and that's, for me, the way it has to be dissected in my mind, because it's so easily done scripturally. Let me beat you with the Bible. That's an old common saying, but it's true. And that's a justification and blame. That is proving that I'm right. And so I really, as our time wraps up here, I really, when you've been hurt, period, doesn't matter who it's by, there's somebody that's hurt you, and you got to look for the telltale signs. Was there mercy and grace? No. And okay, so that eliminates God from the conversation. Now you go into, if it's human, Lord, how do I forgive them? And that's my first step of forgiveness, is going to God, giving the situation to them. Granted, I take it back. Granted, I'm still mad about it occasionally. Now, it doesn't resolve the thoughts, but I got to start somewhere, and only God can heal that. And that's my thing, is when you've been hurt, and now we're going to back up a little bit, remove the church. When you've been hurt by a person, in our relationship, there was a lot of forgiveness on both sides that had to happen. That starts by being willing to forgive them. Not forgetting, not reconciliation immediately. It's about, how do I forgive them? And the only way I've found that works consistently is giving it back to God and saying, God, this is yours. I'm going to give you this situation. You have to work this out, because I see no way possible that this will ever be resolved. I don't know how to forgive them. I don't want to forgive them. But Lord, I'm going to put it in your hands, and you're going to have to show me. So, I mean, when you really look at this is a forgiveness conversation, and putting the players in their spots so that you're not blaming God for everything that happened, and you're not blaming the wrong person. And again, now I'm back to blaming and justification. That's the problem with who I am, is it's very easy for me to get into that, so I have to be very aware of blame and justification. But you really got to understand that forgiveness is freedom. You were forgiven, and I'll be honest with you, you probably have done a whole lot worse than this situation to someone, and you may not even know about it. So I just ask that during these times of the holidays, I mean, timing's horrible. It just is a bad situation, but it is what it is. We are where we are. And so what does this look like? So I just encourage you to try forgiveness in a different way and figure out, start having that conversation with God of what does this look like? So, hey, we love you. We hope you guys have a great week, and thank you for listening.
Who are you supposed to be in Christ?
Yeah.
Because for me, a lot of times they're totally different people.
Yeah. No, that's valid. Write that down. We're 50. We'll never remember it next week. Guys, it's, it's a tough time of the year. And for marriages, for families, for just so many things. And so I just really want to encourage you today that this season will pass. But I encourage you to start figuring out who you are, because that's the only way you can change you, is if you know who you are. And what I realized was who I thought I was and who I really was two completely different people.
Well, and I would just like to end. Sorry if I interrupted you. You paused long enough for me to jump in here. Instead of, and I'm speaking this to myself too, let us not forget the real reason that we celebrate Christmas. You don't have to go blow all of your money. People are still going to love you if you don't buy them a gift. If they don't, then you maybe ought to reconsider who you're buying the gift for. Just try to focus on, do things that can remind you of why we even celebrate Christmas. It's got so commercialized and so out of hand and causes so much stress and anxiety that we kind of forget the real reason for celebrating.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Hey, you guys have a great week. We appreciate everybody listening, and we appreciate all the support. Have a great week.